Hey, good afternoon. I hope everybody's had a great day so far. And I just wanted to real quick introduce myself. My name's Thor Peterson, and I'm a Crow financial reimbursement consultant within our healthcare practice. I'm based out of the Indianapolis office, and I work in data analysis, specializing in visualization design using our Crow RCA reporting module. So let me just jump into this course real quick. Um, we are going to really focus on a few things here. We've got a limited amount of time, so we're going to scratch the surface. But first of all, I wanted to let you guys know where you can go for help, for inspiration on how to continue your training after this session. In this session, we're going to learn how to connect to data, create worksheets with charts, add interactive filters, and create a dashboard. And along the way, we'll be overviewing some filters and some different types of charts and formatting techniques. So the way we'll do it is first we're going to overview the space and terminology around Tableau Desktop. We'll check out a dashboard that I created within the tool, find the data that supports that visualization. And so along the way, you can watch me, you can try it on your own as you're watching, replicating what I'm doing, and press pause and play throughout the presentation as you need. So let's go ahead and get started, jumping into some free resources that are available through Tableau. And so the Tableau Learning Suite, it's all, there are free components and there are some paid components. There are self-paced videos online that you can go to by following this specific URL. I believe there are nearly 10 hours of training, self-paced training videos that are captured in small bite-size videos, 3, 4, 5 minutes, all the way up to 25 minutes. But there are lots of very topical training videos that you can watch at this URL for free. There are also WebEx recordings that are available that are a little bit broader in scope and talk about some higher level topics as well as some how-tos. So if you're interested in learning about concepts around data visualization and using Tableau, best practices, there are lots of different categories there. There are lots of different webinars that are on demand, that are, some are pre-recorded, some are scheduled to happen at some point in the future. So you can access all of that just simply by registering with Tableau, adding in your email address and contact information just for tracking purposes, but it's all free. And then of course the online community is a great place to go when you've got specific questions. I would even step back from that just real quick and say that Google is your best friend. Asking any question within the Google search bar with Tableau is going to give you lots of different options. There are YouTube videos, there are white papers, there are blogs, there are Tableau help articles, community articles, lots of different resources there. So let's jump into influence and inspiration, right? And so here is a great cross-section of what are called Zen Masters. So the Tableau Zen Masters are Tableau evangelists that really work in the data and share their knowledge across lots of different platforms: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. So if you use any of those social media platforms, I would suggest finding these people, following them, and then watching the things that they're promoting or sharing actually on their social media feeds. Lots of how-tos, lots of tips, lots of conversations with other users that will help you build your network and learn from what other people are doing. So this is a great way to stay plugged in and be part of that culture. Okay. So jumping into the dashboard that I created, this is just a quick and dirty screenshot. It's a map of the United States, and we've got a view of the different fuel stations by type, and a count of fuel stations by city. It's very specific, right? So there's a specific question that we're answering with this visualization, which helps direct the user so that they know, hey, you know, I can use this to find an alternative fuel station nearby wherever I am, by selecting a state that I'm traveling in, even selecting a fuel station that I'm interested in using. So for example, if I've got an electric car and I want to be able to find charging stations for that, if I know I'm going to be in a specific city. So this is all meant to be interactive. So let's jump into that and see how that looks. So opening Tableau desktop here, I'm going to go into a full screen mode. And so this is the dashboard connected to the data that I've downloaded from the Department of Energy website that I'll share here in a moment. So coming in here, you know, let's say that I drive an electric car. So I'm interested in electric fuel stations. Okay, and so then looking through here, if I'm in the Chicago area, I might click on Illinois. And so now, having clicked on Illinois, I can see the state of Illinois here and all of the electric fueling stations here. So I can drill down a little bit further if I want. You'll notice that I've got a count of fuel stations by city. The darker the green, the more stations there are. So I can see in Chicago there are 233 stations. In Champaign there are 14. And you'll notice as I'm interacting, I'm using this data value, so this dimension value, to filter the screen here. So I can see on this map that I've got various stations, using a tooltip here to show me where it is by address, visually seeing where it is on a map, and then seeing extra information. So I can see this is a Tesla destination. It's on 2013 South Neal Street. There's a phone number and some instructions on access. And so I can see that it's open 24 hours a day. It mentions for customer use only. So my guess is Home2 Suites is really only making this available to clients that are staying overnight in their hotel. Neat thing is I can filter these out. So I can go up here to this little hamburger. I can exclude specific types of facilities. So I'm going to exclude hotels. And you'll notice I now do not see that dot there. So I'm excluding hotels. I can further refine this so that I can say, hey, you know, I want to only see Tesla related charging stations. And so I can see there are 2 on this map. So hovering over this, 509 East Healy, and then 3308 Mission Drive. So these are some stations that I could visit in order to charge my Tesla. Oh, here's a third one, 2401 North Prospect. So clicking on this dot, I have in the tooltip a URL here, so I can click this website, and then I can see the Supercharger Tesla website here that for whatever reason gives me more information, but being able to access that from the data visualization here is helpful in a lot of different ways. So how else could I use this? Just by backing out of this, I'll go ahead and keep the exclude hotels on there. I still want to find Tesla superchargers or Tesla charging destinations. I'll unselect, let's see, let's unselect Champaign. So now I can see all Illinois. And I'm planning a trip to Florida, and I want to see all of the supercharger or charging stations along the way. So from Illinois, I'll probably travel through Indiana. So clicking and using my control button on my keyboard to select these states, and driving through, let's say I'm going to go to the Panhandle, so through Alabama and into Florida. Okay, so you know, maybe my destination is somewhere along here in the Panhandle. So as I zoom in here, I can use the wheel on my mouse to kind of zoom in or zoom out. I can click on the map, holding down my left click button, I can drag this down. So let's say I'm starting in Chicago, Click, drag down, zooming in. You know, I can see places where I could top off my charge, and then presumably going down I-65 toward Indianapolis. You know, this might be a good place to stop and charge, maybe in this Beech Grove area, or here in Brownsburg or Zionsville. So hovering over here, I could make a note of these addresses and maybe plug those into a Google Maps just to see what the destination mileage is. But moving down along 65, noticing there are some places in Louisville. Continuing down 65, there's a Bowling Green location, Nashville. Continuing down 65, looks like there's a spot in Decatur and Birmingham. And then as I start to move closer to the Florida Panhandle, Montgomery, Alabama, and then across here, you know, into this Mobile, Alabama, Pensacola area, we see we've got other choices here as well. So, you know, this could be useful as I plan my trip. I've excluded hotels, but in this case I may want to go ahead and include hotels since I will likely be staying overnight, possibly somewhere in Birmingham. So finding a place along here, just looking to see, okay, there's a Home2 Suites here in Birmingham. I might look to see if it makes sense to stay there overnight on my trip down. So all that being said, you know, just providing users with a way that they can navigate this map, looking at specific types of fueling stations is definitely very helpful. So we could also do compressed natural gas in the state of Indiana, for example, and see that there are several compressed natural gas stations in the state of Indiana or even in the state of Illinois. So all that being said, lots of different options for things we can do here. You'll notice that I've got a hyperlink here. We'll follow that later in the presentation to go grab some data. Okay, so now back to my PowerPoint presentation. Let's go ahead and jump in here. Alright, so let's go ahead and launch Tableau Desktop, and we're going to get to know the space and terminology in Tableau Desktop. Alright, so at this point you should have Tableau Desktop open, and it'll open up to this connection screen, this start page. So you'll notice we've got a blue band here that allows us to connect to data. So we see file connection, so if you want to connect to an Excel spreadsheet or a text file or various other types of files, you can do that there. There are lots of different server connections, so Microsoft SQL Server is very popular, Oracle very popular. Clicking the More tab here, it'll list dozens of other types of servers and databases to which you can connect. The sample data here is something that's installed with Tableau Desktop, and so this sample Superstore data is something that's used in a lot of the instructional videos that you'll find on YouTube or even on the Tableau site, learning site itself. So that's an important data source to get to know as you're going through training, and you can use your Tableau Desktop on your PC to follow along with those training sessions, which makes it really helpful. This discovery pane is also very helpful in that it allows you to access training videos right from this start page. Lots of different resources here and some advertisements for Tableau. Along the bottom here we've got some sample workbooks, which are just samples to give you some inspiration on how some dashboards could be used for self-guided analytics. This space is empty right now, but as you're building dashboards, it will fill up as a nice repository for you to go back and find dashboards that you've worked on in the past. So let's jump into our data connection data source page. So once we've connected to data, for example, in this screenshot I've connected to the alternative fuel stations data that we'll be using today. We'll see that we're connected to a text data file here. That's the name. We can add new file connections by clicking this add button. But this is our data connection pane. This is our canvas. It shows that we're connected live to the data, which means it'll be querying that CSV file. We've added some filters here on the data, and this is our sample data grid so that we can get to know our data, understand what it looks like, what's included. We can scroll across using the scroll bar to get a comprehensive view of all of the columns, but it's only the first 1,000 rows. So it'll tell us things like the column name, the data type for that column. This is a string indicated by the ABC icon. This is a geo-coded city, which tells us that we could use it on a map. If you were to scroll across here, you'd see some number values that would tell you that it's either an integer or a float. And the idea here is really just giving you the power to be able to define the data architecture that's in place on your data set. So if the data comes over, say for example, with a number column, it's something that you'd rather have recorded in your data as a string, for example. So if it's not something you're going to measure, maybe it's an ID or some description that's numerical in value, but something you would never aggregate or summarize, you might consider changing that to a string just so that Tableau ingests that appropriately. But all that being said, it's fine many times just to go ahead and accept the data the way that it is, take a quick look at it, and then move on to the next step. So that's what we'll do in our exercise. Moving on to the Tableau Workbook workspace. So once you've connected to the data, you'll be able to see all the columns that could be used on your view. Okay. So the idea is you've got a list of columns that are part of this data source, a list of measures that are part of this data source. So you'll notice that these are all number icons. So these are things that we can measure and use on the view. These are mostly text and string values that would be used to group the measures on the view. We've got a toolbar here on the top. We've got a menu at the top as well, so you'll hear me refer to the menu and the toolbar in our training. And there are various icons here that we can use to do different things on our workbooks and our dashboards. This is a filters card. This is a marks card. And so you'll notice we have a color button on the marks card, a text button on the marks card. So I'll refer to those. These are shelves, so a column shelf and a rows shelf that will contain these dimensions. So as we want to group by or measure, we would drag state to rows and measures to columns or vice versa, and those would materialize on the view. There's also this show me button that would be used for changing the charts and the types of charts that we're using on the view. So continuing on with the terminology here, our Tableau dashboard workspace is great where we combine the sheets, the worksheets that we've created, onto a dashboard view. Okay, so the idea is we can specify the dimensions of our dashboard view, so how wide it is, how tall it is. We can pick and choose the sheets that we want to include on our view, and then there are different objects and containers, right? So we'll go through more of that as we begin to build our dashboard. Okay. All right. So let's grab some data here. I'm going to go to this data source here. I'm sorry, to this URL. So take a moment, record this URL, type it into your browser, and when you do, you should see this screen here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now, and wait for that to come up. Okay. So now, so this is the U.S. Department of Energy. This is their alternative fueling station locator. They've got a nice little mapping tool here that you can use to find stuff. But we're going to go ahead and download the results. So we want to build our own. So I'm going to go ahead and click Download Results here. And what we should see is a CSV file pop into our taskbar as this loads. Okay, so this might take a minute or two, depending on your bandwidth. But as soon as this opens, as soon as this is finished loading, which it's finished now, I'll go ahead and minimize my screen. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a new Tableau workbook. So I'm going to get this one out of the way. We might refer to it as we work to build these objects. So for example, this is one object. So that's our count of fuel stations by fuel type. This is our count of fuel stations by city. This is our map of states. And this is our local map. So we're going to build all of these components in our dashboard. So let me go ahead. I'm going to minimize this. I'm going to go ahead to my start menu and open up Tableau. I'm using Tableau 2020.4. I understand you guys will be using 2020.3. For what we're doing here, there aren't any material differences in the two versions, so we should be in good shape. Okay. So I've got this this dashboard. This Tableau workbook here. I'm just going to size it up here real quick to make sure that it fits appropriately in the screen capture. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and, so these are some of those that I created in the past. I'm going to go ahead and just start from scratch here. So let's go ahead and choose a connection to our data. So we know that we saved a text file down. I saved my text file. It went to download. So I'm just browsing to this PC and then to downloads. And I'm going to select the data source that I downloaded today. And it says March 12th. So that's today's date. So if you're looking at this on a date that's different than today, or March 12th actually, you might have a different value in here, but that's okay. So I'll click open, and okay, so now you'll notice that it connected to that data source. This is more information about my data source here. The data source is included on my canvas. I'm connected to it live, and these are the sample. This is the sample data set. Okay, so just scrolling across here, I can get to know my data, get to know my information before I even start building things. And so typically, with a single data source like this, I'll take a quick look at it, but I'm going to do most of my analysis in the tool. All right, so once I've connected here, I'm going to go ahead and click on sheet 1, and you'll notice we're getting some feedback from Tableau here saying go to worksheet. So that's our next step. Okay, so now that we've gone to a blank worksheet, I'm going to go ahead and open this up a little bit. So hovering over this boundary here, I can drag this slider over to the right a little bit, just so that I can get a better sense for the data that I have in here. Okay, so when we were talking about the data and the data architecture, I mentioned that some of these columns are numbers, and they come in as measures, but a CNG dispenser number is really meant to be an ID. So we're not going to sum that. And so let me show you what I'm talking about here. So the way that it came in as a measure. We don't want it to be a measure, and let me show you why. So if I double click on this, you'll notice it's measuring it. So it's saying there are 1,682. So the sum of that value is 1,682. I'd rather have this be a dimension, right? So that I could use it to group other measures, right? So let me go ahead and just clear this sheet. I'm going to move this pill up to the dimensions card. And you'll notice when I left click it and drag it up, I get a little divider line, a little border that says everything above the line is dimensions, everything below the line is measures. So I'm going to drag it up here and drop it. And you'll notice now it's still a number, but it's being treated as a dimension. So as I double click on that, now it's grouping by that, right? Which is exactly what I want. So I don't know what this dispenser number means other than the fact that it's a 1 through 12 value. But now I can actually use that to group a measure. All right, and so a real measure here is, for example, this field here, which if I drag this over, you'll notice this is a count. And so what it's doing is it's counting the number of rows in this table. And so I'm going to use this to count the number of fuel stations in my view. So double clicking there, what I see here is that we have almost 53,000 records that are CNG dispenser number null. So that's great. So it's working the way that I want. I could even add a total here to see how many total records I have. I'll go to analysis on the menu, totals, and then show column grand totals in the menu. So now I can see in total I've got almost 54,000 records. So great. So we just did a quick task. We built a quick view here. Not one we're going to use, but I just wanted to show you how you can manipulate the data and move pills from measures to dimensions. Okay. So another one that we might do are these two numbers. So let's go ahead and grab that, drag it up, scroll back down. This is another number, drag that. Okay, so those will be treated as dimensions. And then, really what I'm concerned about here are this count of fuel stations, which I'll use in my viz, and then the latitude and longitude. So those are two measures that were included in our data. So if we wanted to check out our data again, clicking on this icon there, I'm sorry, let's click that again. So clicking on the data source tab here on the bottom, okay, looking at our data source, you'll notice that we have latitude and longitude. Let me see if I can find it. It's included in the data. Oh, here it is. So they've included the latitude and longitude within this data source that I downloaded from the Department of Energy, which is great because I need that on my local map to be able to tell me the specific spot on a map where a station is located. Okay, so clicking back on sheet 1, you'll notice that I've got some other latitude and longitude. You'll notice it says generated. So these specific measures that are geotagged, city, country, zip, state, Tableau is smart enough to recognize the value as a state, and then using that information, it's going to generate a latitude and longitude for that, right? Which is going to come in handy as we look at states, but for our local map, I want to make sure that we're using the latitude and longitude, okay? So let's go ahead and get started building some of this content. So I'm going to start out with building this specific worksheet here. So counting the fuel stations by fuel type. So let me go ahead and jump in there and get started doing this. Okay. All right. So on sheet 1, I'm going to go ahead and clear this sheet on the toolbar. All right. So I'm starting with a blank sheet. I'm going to build a horizontal bar chart that counts the number of stations by fuel type. So there are two keywords there. Counting the number of stations. Okay, so counting the number of stations. I'll double click there. Okay, and then by fuel type. Okay, so I need to find my fuel type. So fuel type code, double click there. So now you'll notice that I got a nice little bar chart here. Okay, so one of the things that I tend to do is I use this horizontal orientation when I want to represent time or flow of a continuous measure. I'm sorry, continuous dimension. So like dates. In the case where I'm using a string, I like to have the orientation be vertical so that they are pointed horizontally, right? And we can flip the axis here very easily just by clicking on this icon here. So I just flipped it by using this icon. And so now I can read this text better. My mind is, or my eyes are interpreting this as being dimensions naturally as opposed to some time relationship or flow relationship. So what is this telling me? This is telling me that I've got 47,000 electric stations and I've got 898 CNG stations. Okay, so I want to simplify this and bring more information visually into this. And so one of my strategies for that is really to use color, right? So I'll drag a dimension, for example, fuel type code to color in order to color code these. So finding fuel type code, drag that to color. And so now you can see that we've got color representing each of these, and I've got a nice little legend over here that when I click on it, it highlights what I'm looking at. Okay. The next thing that I'd like to do is go ahead and add the label. Okay. So I can do that very quickly by clicking on this icon on the toolbar. So now you can see my label. All right. I'd like to sort these in descending order. So I'm going to apply a sort to this dimension by clicking on the drop down on fuel type code, sorting, and descending order. I'm going to use, instead of data source, I'll use a field. And it already chose my count of alt fuel stations because that's included on the view. Perfect. So I'll click close here. So now you can see we're sorting in descending order. Now I'm going to simplify this a little bit more, and so since I'm showing these values here, I don't really need this scale. So I'm going to left click on it, then right click and unshow that header. Okay, but sorry, before I do that, I want to modify how these how these measures are shown on the axis. So let me edit the axis. Sorry about that. All right, I'd like to go ahead and choose the logarithmic scale so that I can get a better sense for some of these smaller ones. So you'll notice in clicking that, it skews these smaller data points or these marks to where it's growing slower, and then as we move up, it's really exponentially growing as far as the amount of data within that axis, right? So it just gives me like a better comparison so that I can see all of those values by doing it that way, but it does skew the relationship, right? So if I uncheck logarithmic, you'll notice that this is the true scale. So it really depends on the message that you're trying to convey or how you're using this. To give you some tips on what we're going to use this for, we'll be using this as a filter. So really the trick for me is to find what I want, click on it, and then using that as an action filter is my end result. So all that being said, I want to click logarithmic, click close, and then I'm going to right click and hide the show header. Okay, so now I've got a nice and neat little view here. I can further simplify it by removing these grid lines, and I do that by going to format. So I want to format this page, and I'm going to choose lines because I want to change the format of the lines. So I think it's on columns. So since my measure is on columns, I'll go to columns, find the grid line, and choose none. Okay, so now you'll notice the grid line has disappeared. Okay. All right. Awesome. Well, let me just check this real quick and see if there's anything that I missed. Oh, yeah. So there's some things that I'd like to do to filter. So we want to drag some dimensions over to filters so that we can filter this view. So let me close this format page. I want to filter on the EV network. So when I choose EV network and I drag it to filters on the filters card, you'll notice now I've got a list of all of the values. You know, I can choose all here, or I can choose none, or I could choose a specific EV network, maybe Tesla. Let's click apply and see what that does. So now you can see that, you know, it filtered the list for just those electric stations. I'm going to simply select all for now, so that when I add this filter to my visualization, it'll be ready to go. What I want to do is I want to select all here. So I'm going to use all for now, and then later when we create the dashboard, we're going to change the configuration of that filter on the dashboard itself. But I can show you how it works within this worksheet. So let me click OK here. All right. So now we've got the filter here, but if I want to interact with it on this worksheet, I want to show that. So I'm going to right click on the pill and choose show filter. And so now I can see the filter here. So as I unselect all and go to, oh, I don't know, EBCS, or choosing some of these randomly, you'll see that it changes the value. Okay, or I could clear this. Okay, let's go ahead and add another filter. And so I mentioned that I want to be able to filter on the facility type so that I can exclude hotels. So let's find facility type. This time what I'm going to do, instead of dragging it up to filters, I'm going to add it to my filter card and show it all at the same time. So if I right click on facility type and click show filter, then you'll notice now I've got facility type here as well, and I've got EV network. Okay, so then one of the things that I want to do here is, instead of selecting those, I only want to select the one that I want to exclude. Okay, so we need to change this filter type, and we do that by clicking the drop down menu on the filter, and you'll notice I've got a selection here on the menu called exclude values. Okay, so right now it's including all, but if I want to exclude, let's see, hotel or inn, clicking those changes and excludes them from that list. I'll also mention that you'll notice there are lots of different choices here, right? And so, for example, if I find an EV network and I just say, show me just the Tesla networks, I've still got this huge list of facility types. But I don't want to spend time clicking these to figure out which ones work and which ones don't, because obviously if we understand the relationship of the data, not all of these facility types roll up to these networks. Okay, so one of the options we have within this menu, if I left click and drop it down, is to choose only relevant values, which means that included in this facility type list will only be the values that roll up to the EV network that I've chosen. Okay, so I've chosen Tesla here. All of these facility types roll up to that Tesla selection. And as I interact with this whole page on EV network, I'll select all and watch what happens to the facility types. All right, now I've got all of the facility types. Right? Or if I choose AM PUP, those are the ones that roll up to AM PUP. Or if I do BCH, so on and so forth. So I'm just going to click all here, and then I'll click all here. So now I don't really have a filter applied, which is totally fine. The other thing that I'd like to do here is, you'll notice as I'm hovering over these marks, I've got a tooltip that shows me what's being represented. So in my dashboard, if we click over to my dashboard again, you'll notice that when I hover over this, my tooltip is more specific and it's customized. So what I'm doing is I'm giving the user information on what they should do when they hover over this. So click to filter on CNG, right? And we see what happens there. Or click to filter on electric. Okay. So let's show how we do that. So changing this tooltip on the marks card, click tooltip, and then what I can do is press enter a couple times, type in click to filter on, and then I'll just throw in ellipses. Keep that fuel type code, so I'm going to highlight the stuff that I want to delete. Alright, and then I can highlight this fuel type code and change it to, say, 15, and click OK. So now when I hover over this, it shows me the instructions that I want to give the users. Okay, and so we want to be as direct as we can be with our visualization so that the users know how to use this. Okay. Alright, so now let's go ahead and change the title. So it says Sheet 1 now. If I double click here, highlight over sheet name, and I can type in my title, count of fuel station. I'm going to press enter as a carriage return and type in by fuel type. Okay, And I want the fuel type to be kind of a different font, a little bit smaller, so I'll make that 10 and italics. Okay. I'm going to highlight my title, make it bold, click OK. So now I've got a nice title here. I'm going to go ahead and rename my sheet 1 to fuel type code. And that's just so that I can find it and know exactly what it is later. Okay? So let's always get in the practice of saving early and saving often. I'm going to click Save As, and then we'll go ahead and give this a name. Let's see here. I'll call it Alt Fuel Stations, and this is my second version. Okay. All right. So now that we've saved that, let's move on to the next sheet. So we're going to create a map of the U.S. So that's this map here. Okay. And we can do that quite easily. You'll be amazed at how quickly and easily we can do that. So we're going to go ahead and click New Sheet. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to find State on this table. So clicking on State, I'm going to left click there. Looking at this Show Me card, this is where I choose all the charts. All right, you'll notice that these are all grayed out. That's because I've only selected one dimension. And so the only charts that work for that dimension are these two maps. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this filled map here. And so it created for me a map of the United States. And so I'm going to click the Show Me here. But it's given me Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico as well. So one strategy that I could use here is to filter these things out. Okay. And I've got some different options. So the first thing that I'm probably just going to go ahead and do is filter these out using the state. Okay. So let's go ahead and drag state on the filters. And then what I'll do is find Alaska. Well, let's see. We'll click exclude. I'll click none. So I'm going to filter out Alaska. I'm going to filter out Hawaii. And I'm going to filter out Puerto Rico. Okay. So then I'll click OK. All right. So now I've just got the United States, the continental United States. You'll notice that I've got 12 unknown here. That's because there's some Canada data in here as well. So let me go ahead and find country. And so then I'll drag country up to filters. And then I want to only filter the U.S. So when I apply this filter, it includes only the U.S. All right, now you'll notice that went away. Okay. The next step that I want to do is simplify this map. And so there's a lot of extra information on here outside of the states that I've highlighted. Let's go ahead and take a look at the map layers. So I found map layers. Okay. So then there are lots of options here, and if you want to learn more about map layers, I'd suggest you jump into the Tableau video or even do a Google search for some videos on working with maps in Tableau. But in this case, we're going to just uncheck these because I don't want any of that information. All I want is the map of the continental United States. Okay. So let's go ahead and click X on this format. All right. And so the next thing that I'd like to do is I'd like to include the label for the state on the map. Very easy. Just click on the T. And I said very easy, but I need to grab state and pop it onto labels here. All right, there we go. And so you'll notice that latitude and longitude have been brought in, and it's the generated version because I'm showing the detail on state. Okay. Let's take a look here. So there are some things that we can do on this map. One of the things I want to do is change the tooltip so that we can give instructions to the user on what to do when they find a state, and get some information around how many fuel stations are in that state. Okay. So the way that we're counting fuel stations is with this alt fuel stations count measure. I'm going to drag that up to tooltip and then click the tooltip button, and we can see this count number here. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete the description and enter, and I'm going to delete this state description. So now I'm left with just the fields. Okay. And I'm going to click to the left of my first field and just type in click here to filter on ellipses, enter, and then let's go ahead and press delete a couple times, spacebar, pipe, spacebar, so that we create a little bit of spacing here, highlight, and we're going to make this a 15 font. Okay. So now when I click OK, when I hover over these states, now we can see the state code and the number of stations. Okay. Notice that we created some filters over here on fuel type for EV network and facility type that are not found on this page. And this is where we want to ask ourselves, would it make sense to only apply the filter once and have it apply to everything that we create here? So when I filter over, or when I hover over Indiana, I see that there are 559 stations total, right? But here, these may be filtered for just, say, airports. I'm sorry. Let's go back to the Tesla example. So Tesla and Tesla destination. So we see there are 6,075 stations there. So those filters aren't here because this filter list doesn't contain those filters we created. So let's go back over to our sheet, and we can easily apply these to other sheets in our dashboard. So if I right click on EV network, apply to worksheets, all using this data source, which means that any worksheet that's using this data source will have this filter on it. And just looking at this icon, that tells me that it's applied at the data source level. So let's do it with facility type also. Alright, so now these filters should be applied across. Yep, there they are. We want to do the same thing with the filters we applied here. So I'll right click there, apply to filters, all, right click, apply to filters, all using this data source. So now what I've done is I've applied 4 filters across the data source. So now every new sheet that I create is going to contain these specific filters. Okay. Alright, so let's see here. What else? So our tooltip's done. Let's go ahead and change the title. So we want to give the user some information here. So double clicking on the title, select the states in which you will be traveling. Okay, and so then click OK. Alright, and so we've got a nice title there. Let's go ahead and change the name of the sheet and call that US. Okay, so now we've got count of fuel station by fuel type. We've got this title here. We might decide to go ahead and bold this just so we've got consistency in our dashboard. I'll double click there, highlight, make it B for bold. Alright, sweet. Let's see here. I think we're good to go. Okay, so let's create a new sheet. The next sheet we're going to create is the count of fuel stations by city. So this is a highlight chart. So let's check that out. So we'll create a new sheet here. I mentioned that we wanted to group by city, so I'm going to find city on my tables, drag that to rows. It built a nice table for me here. I'm going to find the count of fuel stations and drag that to columns. It created a little horizontal bar chart. I mentioned that we want a highlight chart, so I'll click Show Me, and now I can see this highlight chart is available. There are others available too, right? So just looking at some of these, here's a pie chart. Pretty ugly, can't really see what it represents. Here's a tree map chart, which tells us how many records there are in New York. It's a larger square than the rest of them, so the dimensions of the squares represent how many records there are. But for our comparison, we want to use this highlight table. Okay, and so I'll click Show Me here, and so you can tell by the legend here that the higher the number, the darker the blue. Okay, and so as we're kind of scrolling through here, we see a little bit of variation, but I'd like to make that variation more pronounced, and so I can control the variables here in the legend just by double clicking on that legend, and I can see this is the palette. I can change the color if I want, but what I'm going to go for here is an advanced setting. So if I click End, now anything that's equal to or greater than 25 is going to be the darkest shade of blue. So I'll click OK, and now you'll notice that there's more variation in our highlight table. Okay, and so if you want more information about how to do that, I would check out highlight tables and how to change colors on highlight tables to get some more tips around how that works. So then with this list, my sense is that we'll use this to filter. So the sort in alphabetical order makes sense so that we can find a city very quickly. Okay, but if you prefer to rank these from highest to lowest, we've learned how to sort in a previous lesson. So I'll click the drop down here, click the sort by field. It's already got the count field in there. I'm going to sort in descending order and click close. And you'll notice now, my cities are all ranked from highest to lowest. Okay, but I mentioned that I want to keep it in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this sort by clicking the drop down and clear sort. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead. Let me just review here real quick. Oh yes, and so our tooltip needs to change here as well. So I'm going to click tooltip. I'll keep the city on there. I'll go ahead and highlight and remove the description. Add a pipe. Delete on my keyboard a couple times. Add a space. And then give some instructions. Click here to filter on. And let's make this 15 so that our tooltips are consistent. Okay. And so then I'll click OK. So now as I look through here, I can see the information that I want to see and the instructions to give to the users. Last couple steps here are to change the title and the sheet name. So the title, we're going to go with count of fuel stations by city. Alright, so then I'm going to make this a 10 font and use italics, and then give this a bold. And so now I think that works. Yeah, that looks pretty consistent. Okay, good. So then let's rename this tab city and enter, and we're done with that. So let's move on to our last sheet, which is the symbol map that's going to plot the locations of our fuel stations. Okay, so I'm clicking a new worksheet here, and we're going to start with our stored latitude and longitude. So that's what came with our data. So left click, control left click. So I've got latitude and longitude selected. Go to the Show Me card, and there's only one possible chart. So that's the symbol map. Clicking on that symbol map and then clicking the Show Me, you'll notice that there's only one dot. So that found the center of the data. What we need to do is tell Tableau how to group the data. And so knowing our data, each station has a station ID. That's a unique identifier. So I'm going to drag that to detail. And so now each dot represents a station ID. Okay. So it's this map view has been locked. I'm going to go ahead and click this pin to reset the map. And so that's our map of the United States by location. And as we hover over these dots, we see latitude, longitude, and the ID number. So this is a good start. Let's go ahead and use our fuel type as a code on the color. Okay, and so we've got something filtered here. Let's go ahead and look at fuel type code. Oh yeah, so we're just looking at Tesla stations. So let's go ahead and remove that filter. And we're going to check, okay, we're not excluding anything. Let's go back to sheet 4 now. All right, good. So now we see all of our different types, right? So this is a highlight feature on the legend. So you may find a good use for that in your practice. So then, let's see here. Okay, so let's simplify this a little bit and change it around. So I want to make this a street map so that as I zoom in and I'm rolling my scroll button down on my mouse, you know, I can see some information here, but it's not what I'm looking for. So let's go to the map menu and map layers. Let's change the background from the light option to a streets option. All right, that looks a lot better. I like that. One of the ways that we can simplify this is by removing the terrain. You can even remove the base layer and just show it in white. I like the base layer, so I'm going to keep that on. You know, water labels, you know, maybe we don't need those. City names are useful. Points of interest may be useful, may not be. So you could select that on or off if you want. Up to you. So I kind of like this so far. Scrolling back in a little bit more, you know, we can see, you know, down to even the intersection where these stations are located, right? So that's great. I'm going to go ahead and just zoom this back out again, clicking on the reset map. Let's go ahead and drag some dimensions into our tooltip. So, you know, looking at my example here, when I go into Indiana and I hover over these, I can see information in this tooltip. So we want to be able to bring that information into our tooltip. So we've got to add it to our worksheet first. All right, so I'm going to close this map layer pane. And let's start with the station name. So if I scroll down here and find the station name, I'm going to drag that to the tooltip. And you'll notice it lands on my marks card. I also want the street address. So I'm going to find street address and drag that to the tooltip. So it's been added to my marks card. Let's do the EV network. Drag that to the tooltip. Access days time. So let's drag that to the tooltip. And there's an intersection dimension here. So intersection directions. Drag that to the tooltip. Okay, so now I should be able to have all of those on my tooltip so that I can make this look the way that I want. So I'll click tooltip here. Yep, everything's been added there. I'm just going to go ahead and start fresh here by highlighting everything. So I want to start with the EV network. So clicking insert, find EV network. I'm going to space, throw in a pipe, throw in another space, and this is just my own perspective, my own preference. I'll throw in the station name next. I'm going to press enter and pop in the street address. Let's throw in the phone number next. And I don't have that in my list, so let's go ahead and click OK. and then find station phone. Okay, I missed that. Okay, there it is, station phone. Drag that onto tooltip. Okay, so now we've got everything we need. So I'm going to click tooltip again. Okay, and then position my cursor. Insert station phone. I'll put in a couple spaces. Access days time. Intersection directions. Alright, I think that's pretty good. We can go ahead and make this a little bit larger. So highlighting the network and the station name, let's make that 12. Let's unbold the address and unbold this information here and just see how that looks. So I'll click OK. So then as I'm looking at these, let's go ahead and look at just the electric stations. So you'll notice, as we move through here, some of them don't have the information for the EV network. That's because the data is not there. Okay, but this should work fine for us. All right, excellent. So let's go ahead and rename this sheet local. Okay, we're gonna leave this as it is because we're gonna hide that on the dashboard once we get to creating that. Okay, so then now let's click save. So saved often. All right, I'm going to create a new dashboard now. So this icon with the 4 quadrants is my dashboard. You'll notice I can size this up, and I've got my sheets here. I'm going to increase the size to 1500 by 900. And that's just arbitrarily something I'm choosing, something I know looks good on my screen. So I'll click in the background. I see that I've got these sheets here. Let's go ahead and start building here. So I'm going to start with my fuel type code, and then I'm going to add my city below it. So you notice as I'm dragging this down, you'll notice it turns gray. So if I dropped it in any of these areas, that's where it's going to land. Okay. So I'm left clicking to drag it over and then releasing my mouse button to drop it. And then I know that I want US and I want local to be over here on the right. Now, going back to my original, you'll notice that when I unselect and select, the local map disappears and appears. Okay, so that's the function of an action filter, and these two are contained in one container. Okay, so I want to add that horizontal container to my view. Okay, so here's my object for a horizontal container. I'm going to drag it over to the right here until I can see that it's taking up the entire right side. So right here along this dashed line. Okay, so there's my blank container. I'm going to go ahead and drop US in there first. So clicking to drag it into the container. Alright, and then I'm going to drag my local into the container on the right side. So notice how it's on that gray area. Okay, so now I've got my two maps in one container. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and hide this title. Right click, hide title. So now it takes up the entire pane. In this container, I can move, by hovering over this border, I can move this border to the left, and I'll do that just to the point to where I'm right next to the scroll bar right here. Okay. Alright, perfect. So now on my count of fuel stations, what I want to do is I want to change this so it takes up the entire width of this container. So then what I can do here is just click fit width. Okay. And I can do the same thing with count of fuel station, fit width. Okay. And I notice as I'm looking at this, my titles are a little bit different. So what I want to do is double click on this title and then just pop an S in there. Okay. Alright, that looks better. I can also drag the bottom border up a little bit. Okay. I've got a little bit more information here that I can get rid of. So fuel type, I don't like that there. I already know that this is by fuel type, so let me right click here, hide field label for view or for rows. And I'll do the same thing with this city label. Right click, hide field label for rows. Okay. So now this looks pretty good. I like how this looks so far. I've got more information in here than what I want. So I don't feel like I need this legend here because I've got this color coding here. So I can click on this legend object and exclude it. I can also exclude this legend here as well. Okay. So that's just extra information. I don't think I need it. You may decide you want to keep it, but I'm going to get rid of it. So I'll click X there. Okay. So now I've got this container and this container. I've got these on my view. The next thing I want to do is I want to add a title to this. Okay. So at the top, I'm going to have a title that's similar to this. Is there an alternative fuel station nearby? So I'm going to grab a text box and drag it all the way to the top, right here. And then I'm going to type in, is there an alternative fuel station nearby? And then I like to make these a 20 font. So you notice it's getting larger, kind of the higher levels that we go. So for my title here, that's 20. These titles are 15, and then we get smaller as we move down. So then I want to decrease the size of this, so I'll grab this border, drag it up. That looks good. The next thing I want to do is I want to recover this space here and change the way that these filters work. Okay, so they take up a lot of space right now. What I'd like to do is make these drop downs so that it takes less space. And the way I do that is by left clicking on the object and clicking the drop down. And here I can call it a multiple value drop down. So now I can drop this down, make my selection, and then when I click on the screen it collapses. Okay, or I can clear the filter altogether. Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with the EV network. Click this drop down, multiple value drop down. So now I've got less space. All right, perfect. The next thing that I want to do is I want to change the orientation of them, and I want them to be side by side. So now that I've got these two here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add these filters to my top row. So I'm just going to click this handle and drag it up. Now I'm going to click this handle and then I'm going to drag it to the right. So now I've got my two filters. I can actually adjust the width of these very easily here. And I've recovered my real estate. Okay, so I've got my facility type and my EV network. I might even choose to change the order of these so that my EV network is first and my facility type is to the right. And so just clicking there. Okay, so now that looks pretty good. Sweet. So now let's see. So we want to build in the interactivity here so that when I click on an electric fuel station, it filters the whole sheet. So that when I click a state, it filters the whole sheet. So that when I click a city, it filters the whole the sheet. Okay. So the idea is we want this to be hidden until we select a state. Okay. And then we want this filter for city to filter here. Okay. And to filter here. So let's go ahead and check that out. I want to unselect atoms. Let's go ahead and start building our action filters. Okay, so we'll go into dashboard, actions, add action, filter. We're going to start with fuel type. So I'm going to type in a name here so that I can find it easily. I'm going to run the action on select. The source sheet, I'm going to click on this source sheet fuel type. So that's the one that I want to have selected here. So fuel type code, this is it. And then the target sheet is going to be everything except for fuel type code. Okay. And when I clear the selection, which means clicking on electric is going to filter everything for electric. Clicking on electric again is going to clear the selection. Selected field, I want to choose that fuel type code. So fuel type code, and this tells me that the source is this data source, the target is that data source, everything looks good. Click OK. I'm going to go ahead and click OK here and see how it works. So if I click electric or E85, you'll notice that these are changing. So these states don't have E85 in them. LPG, so on and so forth. Okay, this looks like it's working well. Okay, so then let's add our next filter for state. So when we click on a state, we want these to filter. We want this to filter, but when we unselect, we want this to be hidden. So we're going to use a combination of two action filters for that. One that impacts these two, and another one that only impacts this. So let's check that out. Dashboard, actions, filter action. So we'll say filter on local. So when we click on the US map, so that's checked on select, we want to target local, so that's checked. When we clear the selection, we're going to exclude all values. Selected fields, we're going to add a filter and say state. Okay, so now click OK. Let's check that out. Click OK. So when I click a state, Indiana, when I unselect a state, US. Click a state, Indiana. So it's working the way that we want. Perfect. All right. So the next one I want to add is when I click Indiana, I want to filter these two. So I'm going to go back to dashboard, actions, add action, and I'll just call this state. And then click that. I want to filter on US, and then not local and not US, so we're only going to filter city and fuel type. When we clear the selection, it'll show all values, and so now we want to use state. Oops, state. Okay, and click OK. Alright, cool. So now clicking OK here. So let's unselect Indiana. And so let's go ahead and filter through here. So looking at electric, looking at Indiana. Alright, perfect. So these are all cities in Indiana. So then if I want to find Indianapolis, the next thing I want to do is I want to filter this sheet and this sheet for Indianapolis. Okay, so let's go to dashboard, actions, add action, filter, city is the title, select only city, run on select. We're not going to filter city as a target, and we're not going to filter US as a target, but we will filter fuel type and local. Selected field will be city. Click OK. And click OK. And click OK. So now when I click Indianapolis, you'll notice I just have Indianapolis filtered there. So it looks like I've got some stuff up here. Okay, cool. So what I'm noticing is these colors wash out a little bit in the view, so we may want to change those colors. And the way we do that is by going into the sheet here. Okay, so I'm going to click on this object. I'm going to go to sheet, and I'm going to click, let's see here, there's a filter on here that's, let's see, let me go back to my dashboard. Oh, Indiana. So I'm going to unselect Indiana, and I'll just click Akron and then unclick Akron. Okay, now I've got the full list. Perfect. So let me go back to fuel type code. Alright, so then I want to change these colors. Okay, so I can do it right here on color. edit colors. These are the colors that were automatically selected on that palette. I'm going to choose Tableau 20. Click Assign Palette. And then you'll notice now I've got blue, light blue, orange. So it might take some tinkering, but I can change these individually. I know that, I don't want green on there because my dashboard's going to be green and the states are going to be green. And I don't want people to think that this BD value correlates with the color, other colors that I have on my map. So I'm going to click BD and I'm going to change that to brown. And I'm going to click LNG and change that to this red color. Okay. So now I think I've got a pretty good distribution here. So I'll go ahead and click OK, and you'll notice my colors changed. And if I go back to my dashboard, those colors have changed here too. Okay. So let's check and see how this looks. So if I click electric, and I click Illinois, and I click Chicago, that looks pretty good. I like that. That works for me. So as I'm drilling in, rolling my mouse, I can see that is ChargePoint Network. It's at Pulaski and North Avenue. There's the phone number. And then with this map, I'll just go ahead and unpin that. I think it's working pretty good. So now let's unselect Illinois, unselect electric, and let's unselect the state or the city. Okay, so we've got our full data here. You'll notice on my worksheet, I've got this green. I've got an icon here or a logo. This is green. This is green. So let's check that out. So how do we change the colors? So first thing I want to do is I want to find that logo. And the way that I did that is I simply just went and did a Google search and said alternative fuels. And so then I went to images. And I found something that looked interesting to me. So just scrolling through here, you guys might pick something that works for you. I'm not even sure how I found that. But what I did is, let's use this. So what I'll do is I'll click that one time. I'll right click on it, save image. Then I'm going to save this to my pictures folder. And I've got a little icon subfolder there. And I'll click save. So that's a biodiesel thing. But choose whatever image makes the best sense for you. Let's go ahead and add an image here. So you'll notice I've got this image object back on my dashboard. Drag that up, put it right next to my text box that has my title. Choose the image, and there's my image. Click open. I'm going to fit the image and center it and click OK. So now there I go. I've got it right there. I'm going to drag this border over to the left so that it's not taking up so much space. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to color this so that it ties out with that. Alright, so I'm going to click on this object. That's my text box. Click Layout. And on my background, I'm going to click Background, and I'm going to choose More Colors. And click this Pick Screen Color. And then come over here to my icon or my image, click that image, and now this is the color that was grabbed. So now you can see it's green. It's a little bit difficult to read, so I'm going to change the font of my text to white. So double clicking here, highlight it, drop down, white, and click OK. Alright, that looks pretty good. Let's see, what else? So now that I've done that, I want to change the color of these to that green and the color of these to that same green, just to kind of tie it all together. So let's go to Sheet here. So if I clicked on this object, go to Sheet, click on Color. I've got that color stored right here. And then I can go back to my dashboard, and so this ties together nicely. Next thing I'm going to do is this one. Clicked on the object, and color, edit color. Oops. Oh, let's see. and then click this blue. And let's see here. How can oh, here's a good trick. So I don't have a way to find that color now. So I'm going to go ahead and click cancel, and I'm going to go to this sheet that I know has the color. All right, so here's the color I want. I'm going to go to color, more colors, and I'm going to steal this HTML code. So Control C to copy that, and then go back to my back to my city. Go to color, edit colors, go to this blue, and then highlight and Control V. So now I've got my color, and I'll click OK. So now it's using that same color, and it's applying its own little gradient to make it lighter, as we can see here in the legend. So looking at dashboard 1, so I feel like this looks pretty good. We can also add our URL as a footer, okay, so for reference. So I'm going to go to my web page where I grab the alternative fuels data. So if you still got that up, great. I closed mine. So this is it right here. So then I can copy this URL, just Control C, add another text box at the bottom. Oops, let me just undo that. Okay, so back to dashboard, go to text box, grab this, put it at the bottom, Control V, and I might change this so that it's a different color. So maybe make it a darker gray, give it a bold. You'll notice it's at the bottom. We want that to be right justified, so let's jump in there and right justify that. Click OK, and then grab this upper border of the object and drag it down to the bottom. All right, so that looks pretty good. I like that. So there are other things that we could do to kind of tweak this. I think this is a good stopping point. So let me just go ahead and go into full screen mode here and check out and see how this thing works. So if I click on electric, if I click on Indiana, I can see all of the electric stations. If I click on multiple states, I can go ahead and remove that pin. So now I've got these other states highlighted. If I wanted to look at a specific city, so just scanning through here, what's the biggest city? Looks like Fort Wayne, Indianapolis, Knoxville. So that's Knoxville. Interesting, they've got a bunch of them along I-75 here. This is working the way that I want it to. Looks good so far, so I'm going to undo these filters. Nice. And we're good to go. So I'll click Escape to get out of full screen mode, and then click Save one more time. And that pretty much does it. So that pretty much works through the presentation that I had for today. So as I mentioned in our presentation the other day, feel free to give me a shout if you've got some questions. Email me. I'll see if I can help you out or point you in the right direction. If you've got some questions about Crow and the culture at Crow, feel free to reach out to Jordan or myself. We'd love to share the story of Crow with you. So thanks for sticking with it this long. I know it was a lot all in a short amount of time, but hopefully you got something out of it. I will place the URL for the data in the description of this video. So have a great day. Thanks again. Good luck.